how do I stay permanently in walking in love, walking in the love paradigm? How do I stay permanently in it? The first answer is releasing judgment. And when we release judgment of ourselves as well as judgment of other people. And in a funny way, we have to begin with the judgment of ourselves. So, judgment of ourselves, like, I'm too loud, I'm not loud enough, I'm too bright, I'm not bright enough, I'm this or I'm not this. Any judgment whatsoever of ourselves. Now, we can have observations like, I'm not feeling well. That's an observation. Or I'm feeling uncomfortable, or I'm feeling unhappy. So it's important to distinguish the difference between what's a judgment and what's an observation. And a judgment makes us feel bad about ourselves. An observation presents us with an opportunity. Oh, I am not feeling happy in my job. Maybe I want to consider making a change. Or, oh, I'm feeling uncomfortable with, this aspect of my body, maybe my digestive system or, whatever. Maybe I want to make some shifts in how I take care of myself so that I feel more comfortable in my body. But do we see the difference between judgment and observation? Judgment is right and wrong based, and observation is feeling based. How am I feeling? And what can I shift to feel better? So that's the first thing. So it's interesting to be dwelling in the love paradigm. It begins with ourselves, and it begins with what goes on internally for us. Are we in judgment mode? And anytime we catch ourselves in a self-judgment, we stop and we ask ourselves, can I reframe this as an observation? Because when it's a judgment, action very seldom proceeds forth from judgment. Because usually if we've made a judgment, then we're busy feeling badly about ourselves because we've made a judgment. We can't choose, we can't change. Those things are hampered by judgment. But if we can shift the judgment to an observation, to a feeling-based thing, then we can ask ourselves, okay, what can I shift? What can I change so that I'll feel better? And not even so that I won't feel this way, because that's a negative, but so that I'm feeling better. What do I need to shift? What do I need to do? What changes might I make so that I can be feeling better? And then even beyond that, we can ask ourselves the exploratory question. What might get in the way of me making those changes? So we have the observation, it's feeling based. From the observation, then we identify, well, what could we change that would make us feel better? And then we ask ourselves that follow-up, what would get in the way? So in other words, it's an exploration, and we're not putting judgment or expectation on ourselves. We go for what small things we can change, because once we begin changing small things, then that feels comfortable, and then we can add a little bit more at a time. But the important thing is, it all starts with not doing judgment, but doing observation. Because when we're in observation and feeling based and asking ourselves questions like, what can I change and what would get in the way of that? Do you hear the loving tone? It's a very loving tone. So even just in doing that, we've shifted ourselves into that loving perspective. Okay, so that's judgment of ourselves. Then there's judgment of other people. It's so easy to have that pull us out of the loving paradigm because other people drive us nuts. And so for us, it's judgment versus observation. For other people, it's judgment versus understanding. So if we shift our understanding of that person to, oh, fellow flawed human. Fellow flawed human, just trying to be okay. And that fits for somebody doing something really bad and for somebody doing something really not so bad. Fellow flawed human, just trying to be okay, is somebody who intentionally sabotages us, in our career, or, I don't know, we're trying to buy a house and they steal it out from under us or whatever. But if we take a deep breath and look at them as a fellow flawed human, just trying to be okay. And maybe they're trying to be okay because they're trying to get something that we have that they want, or they're trying to be okay by making us look bad so that they feel better. Their action, it's not okay. It's never okay to be bad or a bad person. But we, in our judgment of them, we only make ourselves unhappy. And if we just simply go, oh, fellow flawed human trying to be okay. So there's judgment and there's understanding. So we shift from judgment to understanding. Then from understanding, we apply discernment. We ask ourselves, do I need to take any action about this? Am I being harmed? Is someone else being harmed? Do I need to take action? And then the follow-up question would be, what will be the most effective action? And we really look at that, like, is this the action that I want to take because I can rat them out and and get them in trouble? Or is it the action that really brings about change for the situation? We have to be careful that our taking action isn't motivated by seeking retribution, by trying to get even. And sometimes it isn't hurting anybody. And if we just shift to that understanding, all of a sudden we feel better. Somebody cuts us off in traffic, we're not going to go chase them down. But if we just go, oh yeah, fellow flawed human, just trying to be okay, we have no way of knowing what's going on for that person. Yeah, we have no way of knowing. So just those two things, judgment of ourselves and judgment of other people, that shifts 90% of it into the love paradigm. And it gives us action things to do. We're not just shifting perspective, then we're also able to take action when necessary so that we're actually bringing about change in our lives. So, how do we respond when others are judging us, when we are the recipient of judgment? That can take us out of love, out of feeling the love paradigm, because that can be really painful to be judged by other people. So the first thing is, instead of taking on the judgment, we move from judgment, this one coming from outside of ourselves, we move from taking on the judgment, we move to consideration. Because see, if we take on the judgment, we immediately feel, oh, I feel bad, oh, I feel judged. But if we step outside of their judgment into consideration, oh, they said this thing. I'm going to think about that. I'm going to consider that. And we can even say to the person, if they're actively in the middle of judgment, we could say, I hear what you're saying. That's an interesting perspective. I'm going to consider that, or I'm going to give that some thought. Oftentimes that will shut someone down, so they'll stop judging us because they'll be like, oh, thank God, he finally heard me. She finally listened, And so in many ways, it's very helpful for us because it will stop them judging. But for us, we don't take the judgment on. It's like we hear it, and when we say, oh, I'm really going to consider that, and we might be saying that directly to the person, or, they might not be there in person. We might just be saying it to ourselves. But either way, we no longer accept judgment. We consider what people have said. And we really do consider. We look at ourselves and we think, Is that true about me? Now, maybe a little bit, maybe sometimes. Is it always true? No. Is it partly true? In some cases, maybe not at all. So we really consider, and then in the part of considering, we also look at the other person's motivation. What is their motivation for that judgment? Are they my boss and are they simply trying to get me to be, better at my job? Okay. Is it my beloved and they're simply trying to get me to operate in our relationship in a way that's more comfortable for them? Or is this a person who is themselves either hurting or insecure and they're just throwing judgment around so that they feel better? From an external judgment from somebody else, we consider, is that true? Is that not? Is that always true or only sometimes true or never true? Or was it true once and never again? And then we ask ourselves, what's their motivation for the judgment? Because even if what they're saying is true, if their motivation is to try and make themselves feel better, then, that factors into, do I need to change this about myself or not? Because sometimes we might see, oh, yes, what that person is saying really is true quite a lot of the time, and they are my boss, they don't hate me, and, yep, maybe I need to change that. Or that's just a random person that I know and they're not my boss, and what they said is unkind and hurtful, and maybe they're feeling bad about themselves, and I don't think it's true about me. Oh, I don't need to change anything. This isn't even about me. And that's an important thing, to identify that when it's not about us. We step away from it, we step out from it. When we consider and add in the motivation and we identify, maybe there's some truth to what they said, and maybe I do need to make a shift, then we do from a place of, we decided that it was necessary. We didn't do it because, I was judged, I'm a bad person, I was caught out, whatever. No, it's like, I really thought this through, and I've decided this is necessary. Now, sometimes we might need to get back to the person and say, I've really given that consideration, and this is what I've decided. And sometimes we don't need to get back to them. Most of the time, we don't need to get back, especially if their motivation was unkind or if they aren't looking for an answer. But especially if it's our beloved, then we probably do need to get back to them so that they know they've been heard and that we considered, and so that they can count on, here's what we're planning on doing, or we're not going to change that, but this is why. I'm not dismissing you, my beloved, and not changing this just because, but here, because why? And that it doesn't mean I don't love you, but this is where I'm at, and I'd love to hear more from you about this. Now, what's interesting is it feels like a lot of steps to do this, but it's like when we are first learning how to play the piano and we sit down and we look at it and we go, oh my gosh, that's a lot of keys. But once we learn to play the piano, boom, we know where they are. We know what to do. Each finger knows how to hit them. And it becomes, we're not at all overwhelmed. It's very comfortable and it's very natural and it just flows and we don't even think about it. So that's an important factor, is the learning curve. And so we remind ourselves when we're in the learning curve, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to hit wrong notes. We're going to miss a judgment. We're not going to catch it, or we're going to respond in the old way to a judgment. And that's okay. It's a learning curve. And we also remind ourselves when we're in the midst of the learning curve, like when we're sitting in front of the piano, practicing our C major scale for the 85th millionth time, and we're sick to death of it, we remind ourselves, oh yeah, this is going to get me where I want to be. I'll be playing Chopin's pieces in no time, with no effort, and just really enjoying the the beautiful music. And so that's what we tell ourselves. I will be dwelling in love effortlessly, because that's what we do get once we get past the learning curve. Dwelling in love effortlessly. There are probably more things to help us dwell in love, but honestly, if we just start with those 3 forms of judgment, almost all of us on the planet, if we were all practicing just these 3 simple things, judging ourselves, judging others, and how we respond to being judged, there would be so much love everywhere. Everything would be so much better. There probably wouldn't be any problems.